talking about a session on what I wish I knew in my 20s. We're going to be going over some money principles today on giving and saving and some principles on that. So if that sounds like something interesting to you, tag someone in this, share this with someone as well, and excited to get into this. Now, I don't know about you, but money is one of those things that is one of the least talked topics, especially in life growing up. My family didn't talk about money much. They basically, the only thing that they said is try to make a lot of it and try not to spend a lot of it. That was pretty much it. If you go to school, they really don't talk much about money as well too. And also, when it comes to America now, when it comes to the topic of saving and giving, that is one of the biggest areas of issue in America. I mean, you just take a look at America in itself. Last we counted, I think we're like $20 trillion in United States debt. Does anyone remember? Right? Put in the chat if you know where we're at right now. I lose track. The last I checked as well too, the average American saves, get this, a whopping negative 1% a year. Did you know that? So the average American is losing a percent of income a year. So there's an issue, and there definitely was with me as well when it came to money and the topics of giving and investing. If giving and saving and investing as well too, if those are not addressed, I wish I knew that a lot sooner because I have a lot more now, and life would be a lot better than where it is. But hey, I have no regrets for the past, but it's learning lessons. Okay, so I wonder if this relates with you at all. I thought when it came to the idea of saving and investing or saving and giving, it's something that I would do when I was making a lot more money, right? It's kind of like one of those things where it's like, well, later on I will, right? But right now I got to pay the bills. Right now I got to pay the mortgage. Right now I got to pay for my rent. Right now I need to pay for my car. Right now I need all these other things to pay. And it always seemed like, I don't know if you felt this way at all, but this is how I felt when I got my paycheck. It was like almost right away, all the funds were gone. It's like it just ran away or something. Right. But I knew that in the future, obviously, I want to give. Obviously, I want to be philanthropic. Obviously, I want to be able to save money and these types of things. Right. But the issue was this is that I thought that it was way later on. And what I realized was this is that if you don't save, if you don't give, what's up, Chula? Great to see you. What's up, Angelica? Great to see you. If you don't save, if you don't give, while you don't have a lot, you actually won't give or save when you do have a lot. It's a habit thing, it's not a money thing. And that's one of the biggest things that challenged me because I thought it's a lot easier to think about that when you're actually making a lot more. But it's a habit. Okay. And I remember I was going to church one day, and one of the big tenets in church is tithing, which is giving, right? You give 10%, your first 10% to the church. And he said this, he said, well, hey, let's say you're making let's just call it 1,000 a month, right? If you're not going to give $100 out of $1,000 when you're not making a lot, what makes you think that you're gonna give 10%? Let's say you made $1,000,000 in a year, right? What makes you think that you're going to give $100,000 when you're not going to give $100? And I thought about that. I'm like, that's so true. So I tested this principle out. And just to share this quick story. I knew about giving. I knew about tithing in church specifically. I'm like, I think I should do it. Right. I know it's supposed to be good. I heard like Tony Robbins say the secret to living is giving and these types of things. Right. So I started to make this a priority. And I said, I'm going to aim to give. So I started specifically doing what's called a tithe. So in church, it's the first 10% of your income I gave, right? And I'm in business, so my income's up and down. It depends on the day, it depends on the time. And what happened was this, just to share this story, is there came a time when I really wanted to give, I wanted to tithe, and I had a car payment, okay? And I had just enough money to give either my tithe or to give my car payment. I had a decision. I'm like, oh my gosh, like what should I do right here, right? But I made a decision. I know there's principles, right? There's spiritual principles, there's financial principles when it comes to giving. So I made a decision to say, you know what? I'm just going to give my giving. I'm going to give my tithe. And I guess we'll figure out the car payment side. And get this, the craziest thing happened. I gave that tithe. It was around like $800 or something. And that day, it turns out that there was a competition that I did not know that I was in the running for in my business. And it turns out that I had won a bonus and I won this competition that I did not know that I was in competition for. And it turns out, so I tied, let's call it $800. It turns out I actually won $1,000 that very same day that I made the decision to prioritize giving over everything else. And I'm just like, wow, I made enough in that same day to cover what I just gave and more. Isn't that interesting? And if you've ever given, whether it's to a charity, whether it's to church, whether it's a part of your financial habits, you know what I've noticed is that the givers in the world on a financial status. Now, this works with other principles as well, other areas in your life, or giving of your time, giving of your talent, but giving of your money specifically. When you start to give and it's a priority for you, the world and the finances of the givers expand. And since that day, yes, there's been tight times. Yes, there's been hard times and stuff like that. But the stresses of money have never been the same as it was since then. We've always been provided for. We've always been able to pay the bills. And what I realized that day was this, is that giving is just simply a mind state. Giving is a heart state. And when you challenge yourself to give, the same goes with saving as well too. If you feel like you can't afford to give now or save now, the issue is not a financial balance sheet thing. The issue is a heart thing. Let me explain. Isn't it interesting how we always just seem to make just enough for exactly what we need? And for me before, it was I always made just enough to get by, but never more. Right? And I'm like, why does it always happen this way? No matter what my bills are, no matter what my income is, it's like it always climbed up there. And what I realized through this giving situation was that the real issue was that I had an addiction to spending. I had a habitual issue with my finances, which is this feeling of I'm always just going to spend everything that I have. And that could be 1,000 a month, that could be 10,000 a month, that could be 100,000 a month. The issue is not a how much do you make thing. Have you realized there's an infinite amount of things to buy in this world? There's so much that you can spend money on. There's so many toys. There's so much stuff. So the issue of not being able to give or not being able to save, it is a mindset thing. It is a habit thing. And to put it even more straight, it is an addiction to just getting temporary pleasures rather than long-term gain. So I started to give. I'm like, wow, okay, I'm actually now habitually giving now, right? So principal habits I wish I would have learned is give when you don't have a lot. And giving actually gives a lot more joy. Giving gives a lot more blessing. There's financial principles, spiritual principles to this. Why is that you see the happiest people in the world? They're the ones that give, because it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. We learn these truths, right? So give, number one. Saving is another thing too. Now I'll tell you, saving was another challenge as well. So we started to give, and we're like, all right, but then we were living off the rest. We're like, but can we afford to save? Have you ever felt like I can never afford to save? I got to pay for my debt. I got to pay my bills with inflation, blah, blah, blah. How does this all happen, right? And saving, we went through the very same process as well, where we had a season where we said we needed to make a decision that we're going to save X amount. So for us, we tithe 10%, we give 10%, and then we save 10%. It just, we put it in math. We put it into like an equation, right? And I remember what happened when we decided to save. When we decided to save, it was hard at the beginning. It was tough in the beginning. But you know what happens is when you make the decision and you start living by those decisions and those principles, your life expands. You start living off a little bit less, You start getting creative and making a little bit more, or you start downgrading certain parts of your lifestyle that you really didn't need before. You start realizing what's priority and what's not. But you know what starts to happen is if you implement these principles of giving and saving early, you give it some compound time, and this really starts to build up. If you gave every single month, for example, that was a part of your principle, imagine how many lives you would have been able to help. You know what's great about giving is that you are able to see what your finances can do for other people that might not have as many privileges as you. Some people say, well, James, I'll give when I'm making more money. I'll give when I'm wealthy. You know what also slapped me across the face? If you're listening to this right now, you live in America and you make minimum wage. Minimum wage. Did you know you make at least $32,000 a year? Did you know that if you make 32 grand a year, that you're in the top 1% of wealth in the entire world? $32,000 a year puts us into the top 1% of the entire world. So I used to think I'm not wealthy, you know, like the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Elon Musk, they're the ballers out there. If I was making their money, then for sure I'd give, right? If I was making their money, for sure I'd take. But no. When I realized that we are already living in abundance and wealth here, we are living way higher standards of living than the rest of the world. It's just that we keep on spending more, right? When I realized that, I said, I got to flip the script on this thing because I have an addiction to spending right there. So I started to realize there's some things that are priority. And one of the biggest priorities is giving. When you start to give, you start to realize you start to cut the shackle of spending addiction. When you start to do some charity, when you start to tithe, you start to break the bondage of money. And you start to realize that it is way more blessed to give. You see what it does for other people. You know, you give it to an organization, they could do more with it. You know that you don't need it all yourself. You know that part of your wealth, part of your resources is designed so that you can give it to others to better their lives. It gives you the joy now, immediately, because we all know you are much happier when you give. You're much happier when you give. And especially when it comes to your money, a really, really close and near and dear personal part to all of our lives. When you start giving just some, you just get so much more happiness from there. Okay. Number two, you start to save a little bit. You start to think, well, what's $10 a month? What's $100 a month? You keep on racking that thing up, it compounds, and you all of a sudden you start to see, oh my gosh, I got this big savings got nowhere. Now I have opportunities. Now I might have investments. Now I might be able to take that trip with my family that I really wanted to. Now I can actually pay off my debt. Now I can actually do the things that I really wanted to do. But it comes by disciplined action over the course of time. But it has to start small. I'm going through this series on things that I wish I knew in my 20s. I wish I knew this earlier because I'm going to tell you this. I made the biggest financial issues in my life, and maybe you have as well too. And that's okay, right? I made a lot. I spent it all. And then I lost it all, right? It's like, one day I realized money just comes and goes. Like, you're not going to, what's the difference of 10%, right? And I appreciate the honesty there, right? And I'm just like, gosh. But when I started to then learn that it's more blessed to give, and I started to learn that you should save a little bit of your money, and that's okay. You know, you don't have to enjoy it all right now. Now I definitely wish I knew that earlier. It would have saved so much pain. And now, instead of feeling like I never have enough, now I'm actually grateful for the amount that I do have. And if you know what this does is if you implement these principles of just, I'm going to give, I'm going to save. Those are priorities, number one priorities, and then I'm going to live off the rest. What it really, really does is it flips your contentment and it flips your gratitude on what we already have. If you don't ever have enough to save or to give, you always live in lack. If you do give and you save, you always live in abundance and you live in gratitude because you're like, I'm just grateful for what it is that I do have. And you honor that in a different way, you know? But I wish that these things were taught more in school. I wish I heard this from people that were of influence when I was in my, young 20s. I'll tell you this: I messed up in my finances my entire decades of 20s, and then I just honestly just started getting it right. I'm like, why did I do this? But it's okay. And if you've gone through that, it's okay as well too. But I hope that this hits you at the right time. I hope this encourages you to get some principles down as well too. So if this was, I'd love for you to share this with somebody. Tag a 20-something-year-old in this for sure as well too, right? I hope that this can get to people in time so they have to go through this, right? Yeah, if they had taught us in school, it'd be so much better, wouldn't it, right? And we have this now on YouTube. I'm putting all my content out there. So if you like this type of content, subscribe to my YouTube. I do a lot of different types of stuff as well. I hope this blesses you. I hope this interests you. And every night, Monday through Friday, I'm still going through this series of what I wish I knew in my 20s. And there's things that you would have wished you knew as well, too. Cool topics. Let me know as well, and perhaps I'll talk about it as well. I appreciate these types of discussions. Other than that, have a great evening. Thanks for being on. Talk soon.